Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome officially back in person. We're going to call this July 22nd, 2020 meeting of the AMATS Policy Committee to order. Time is 1:30. We're going to do a quick roll call. Ms. Alexel. Here. Mr. Constant. Here. Mr. Baker. Ms. Falcon. Here. And myself. So we have a quorum. So that's great. Craig, will you please do the public involvement announcement?
Yes, all AMATS committee meetings are open to the public. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or a consultant. After that, the committee will be given a chance to discuss the matter, and then we will open the floor to public comments. A couple logistics I did want to go over, though. You have your iPads in front of you. They are, it's the first time in a while we've used them, so we had a lot of fun times with IT, getting them hopefully configured correctly. You do have the password there in front of you. There's a 15-minute lockout, so if you're not using it for 15 minutes, it will go to sleep on you, so you have that password there so you can enter back in.
You can just swipe left for each item. Should be already loaded up for you.
So your item should be there and ready to go. Other than that, let's light this candle.
Okay. We should probably add to that, the public comments are 3 minutes in duration, and informational briefings are 15 minutes?
15-minute limit on the informational item, yes.
We're going to get a gong or something over here.
We'll work on that.
Okay, great, thank you, Craig. Moving on to item 4, approval of the minutes. Do we have an approval? Do we have an approval of the agenda?
So moved. The agenda.
Moved. Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any changes to the agenda? Any objections to the adopting the agenda? Agenda is approved. Okay. All right, moving on to agenda item 4. We have before us the minutes from the June 24th, 2021 meeting for approval. Do we have a motion on these minutes?
Move to approve.
I'm sorry?
I'll move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Seconded. Okay. Any changes or discussion on the minutes?
I would just note that I was not here for that meeting.
So, any objections to approving the minutes as submitted? Okay, hearing no objections, the June 2024-21 minutes are approved. Okay, moving on to the action items. Item 5A, non-motorized public plan review draft and staff comment response summary.
Joni Wilm, our senior planner, who manage that effort, is here today, and we'll give you a presentation.
Great. So it's to be sort of a quick summary. Don't have a PowerPoint or anything because a lot of you have already heard a lot of the info about this, but this is the non-motorized plan public review draft that's before you today. And let me just give you a little bit of background on the process. So we started this plan in 2017. It's been about 4 years of public engagement. This plan originally was set out to replace our bicycle plan, pedestrian plan, and the trails plan. So that was the intent of the project. We worked on it for a long time. We had over 400 internal agency review comments that went into, so that's municipal, internal agencies, DOT, other transportation agencies, that went into this draft and are reflected in the draft that's before you. At that time, we put the draft out for a 60-day public review period. That was in January. That was January 1st or something to March 5th. And then at that point, we took all of those comments and then put them into, a lot of paper here, put them into this comment response table. And so overall at the end, we received 762 public comments. So those are in this comment response table that we have. We also have copies of these if you want those. And so then staff went about replying to all of those comments, giving their staff recommendations and responses. So that whole thing, that was a big effort, and we did have on June 29th, we had a work session with the Technical Advisory Committee and the Policy Committee to go over all of those comments in case folks had things they wanted changed or revisions to be made. So we did have some, we made those revisions, and those revisions are also reflected in the table that's before you. So everything that the policy committee and TAC committee asked for was changed and put into the table here. So today we are asking, skip a step. July 8th, we had a technical advisory committee meeting to approve or to recommend approval of this public review draft with the accompanying table of staff edits and changes based on the public review. It's a lot of things to keep track of, sorry. But that was July 8th, and so they made a motion to approve it, to send it forward to you for final approval. And so today we're here asking for you to recommend approval of this draft with the joining table. Once we get your approval, we will move forward and make those actual changes in the final draft plan, which will then go before the assembly and come to you again for final approval. So that's the process, and I just want to explain really briefly the public comments, because I think it's just helpful to sort of know what those were all about. So again, 776 comments. Christine, our public planner here, put together some really nice graphics to sort of help people digest all of the comments. So that's this form right here. As you can see, the majority of those comments were pertaining to specific projects. There are also comments on the document itself, asking for changes on the document itself, policy changes, some other categories, which I'll go over in a second, changes for asks for different design considerations, and then finally, the last category was coordination, and that involved coordinating with other documents that we already have. So, and I'll just go over these briefly, but the first category, the projects category, was the biggest one. So 38% of our 762 comments were about projects. Those were either asking for a new project recommendation or a reprioritization of a project that existed in the plan. Some were comments supporting the projects, and then some were comments that asked for a project to be deleted. So that was a project category. Next category was the document category. So these made up 24% of the overall comments. There were three major categories in that, or three major breakdowns of that category. They included asks for changes to figures or tables in the plan, so some more graphics, asking for text edits, and then asking for data, different data edits to data that we have in the plan. Next category down is the policy category, and those, a large percentage of those policy comments were about maintenance and seasonal maintenance in particular, so asking for policies regarding winter maintenance practices and other things of that nature. Policy and program development was another ask. Education and funding and equity were the last three in that category. The next one is the other one, that is just asking for clarifications, basically, if they didn't understand something, and then a general positive or negative comment on the plan. We were happy to see that most of the comments were positive, but we did get some negative comments for sure. So, and then the last two categories I'm going to talk about are design and coordination. Design, the majority of the design comments we got were regarding safety. Facilities came in next with specific non-motorized facility design. Signage and amenities for wayfinding, and then winter design was the last bit there. And then for the final category, coordination, this was basically asking us to coordinate better with the other existing plans that we have. So yeah, that was definitely the biggest one. Then we also did have a lot of asks to coordinate with more recent HSIP data, which is DOT data that wasn't finalized when we started the process 4 years ago. So we're trying to catch up with that. So that's in this table. You'll see that we have highlighted specific meeting requests to meet with DOT, go over those, and figure out a way to incorporate all the HSIP data into the document. So, and then the last two are public involvement coordination and coordinating with different agencies. So I know that was a lot, but it's a lot to digest, but does anyone have any questions about what I just talked about?
Any questions or comments from
I think there's a lot of work going into it, so thanks for the effort.
Thank you. Great. Yeah.
All right, any questions or comments from the public? What is the will of the committee? To approve. And second. Okay. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Okay. Yeah, good effort, Johnny. Okay, moving on to item 5B, the AMATS 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program Criteria Public Comment Period. That is a mouthful, correct? You want to tell us about that?
It's good stuff. So just a reminder, the TIP is the 4-year program of projects. It's what we use to actually allocate the federal funds that AMATS gets to decide. And it is updated every 4 years. We try to take a fresh look at the criteria that we use to rank and score projects every 4 years to make sure we're being as objective as possible and we're following the latest federal guidelines. If you'll remember the last time we updated the TIP criteria in the 19 to 22 TIP, we got towards the end and Mr. Weldon had some questions. We wanted to get a tighter connection between land use and transportation planning. And we suggested, because we were right at the end of trying to approve it and federal fiscal years and making sure we didn't have lapses and all those wonderful things, he agreed, all right, he'll put off his efforts to do a more wholesale update of the criteria until the next go round. So this is the next go round. So we've spent probably a year and a half, not completely full time, but Aaron and I and someone who's working for John, Meredith Noble, we went over criteria from around the country. We tried to get them connected to the latest things that we were using, including Vision Zero and the Complete Streets stuff that we've done previously. And we came up with a set of criteria. We took those before the committees and they said, wow, you kind of got some things a little bit off here. And we thought, well, we're not seeing the forest for the trees. And so we backed off a little bit, tweaked them a little bit. And so what we did was we created the ones that are before you today, had some work sessions on them, and bounced them off of the folks that are in the agencies that use these things all the time. And we came up with those versions that are before you now, and we're asking you to release them for a public review period. They did go to the TAC 2 weeks ago, and they recommended release them as is out for a public review period. So happy to, Aaron and I will be happy to answer questions on those, but we're looking to get these released for a public review so we can continue down the line of getting new projects nominated and a new TIP approved.
Questions or comments?
Thank you. Question for staff. Would a longer review comment period hinder the work or the next steps in any way if we went to a 60-day review period?
I think we could probably accommodate that.
Any other? Any questions or comments from the public on this issue? Is there anybody on the phone?
Yes. I think we have about 4 or 5 people on the phone.
Okay. Let me know if I'm not speaking loud. Okay, hearing no questions or comments from the public, what is the will of the committee? Move to approve.
Second.
Second. Okay. Are there any?
To move to amend? Yes,
Okay.
I'd like to move to amend that these be released for a 60-day public review period.
Second.
Any objections? Okay.
I think the rationale is good.
The rationale is so community councils will be back in session toward the end of that 60-day, and since this is a little bit different than what we've seen before, give the opportunity to engage with them.
Makes perfect sense.
Although if John were here, I think I would channel him, and what he would say is just because they don't meet in the summer doesn't mean our business should not move on. But since it doesn't have a delay or an impact on the project, there's no problem waiting. Because the message to community councils is need.
My understanding is we're very early in the process here, and we can't afford some additional time.
Yeah. We're early. We are always under a time crunch, but I think we can accommodate the extra 30 days.
And I believe, was it the non-motorized that we put out there for 90 days this last time?
It's at 60.
60.
60, okay, so it's not. All right, so, Mr. Baker, Robert's rules of order here. We got a friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment. Second. You're doing really good.
That's not Robert's rules, but that's okay.
Okay, so are there any objections to the friendly amendment? So, none of us does. That's correct. Okay. Hearing none, the friendly amendment is approved, then we go back to the original amendment, or the original vote. Or we have a motion to approve. We have a second as amended.
Ms. Zolotelo, motion first.
Okay.
Second.
And any objections as amended? No objections, the motion is approved. Okay. All right, that was item 5B. Moving on to 5C. The AMATS 2019-2022 TIP Amendment Number 2, Air Quality Conformance Determination. Correct.
So we've had our TIP amendment out for a little while, and we're looking to approve it today so we can make sure we get our monies obligated in time. The first step that we always have to do is to approve the air quality conformity, because if it doesn't meet those regulations, et cetera, then you can't approve the TIP, doesn't matter. So let's see, I can't remember exactly what they call it, I'm blanking on it right now. The interagency consultation team met, and that's EPA and DEC and DOT, et cetera. All these groups met together and they looked at the amendment. The main thing that was on there that required this conformity determination was the addition of the Academy Vanguard project. It's not a standalone safety project. Standalone safety projects are exempt from the air quality conformity determinant. They can go through. You can do those a little faster, but in this case, it needed to be looked at, and the team met and agreed that the contents of the determination report, including review of all the data associated with it, makes it is appropriate to update that conformity, and it, for lack of a better term and in layman's terms, it doesn't pollute too much. So we don't disrupt the environment by this proposed creature. So TIC recommended 2 weeks ago to approve this air quality conformity determination. A few votes.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee on air quality?
I think that those municipality and DEC and pay for making sure that the air quality stays protected.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? Hearing none, any comments or questions from the public on the air quality performance? Okay. Hearing none, what is the will of the committee?
Second.
Second. Okay. Any objections to approving the motion from anyone? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Okay. One more remaining action item, 5D, the AMATS TIP Amendment Number 2.
The actual TIP itself is here before you. You've seen this a number of times. I think you can look at the documents and see what we're adding. It's all pretty much standard stuff that we've talked about for a while. The one change I do need to make on the floor here is that we have project number, and we'll give you the right number here. It's the 92nd Avenue Recon Study, which I just passed over here, which is in the planning table, which is table 4. It is project 6 in there. This is a project that was originally nominated by DOT as an extension. I think it was around $28 million. It's a proposed extension of 92nd Avenue from Old Seward to King Street. In the discussion at the TAC, the representative from the railroad said that's going to be challenging due to the railroad and crossing that railroad or going under the railroad or whatever, and so suggested that probably wasn't going to happen in his lifetime. And we said, well, let's do a recon study instead. we were approached, the municipality were approached just recently saying, okay, we want to obligate this project, but we need the local match of 22,000, I think, or whatever it was. And of course, the way that the municipality can pay local match is typically bond funds, and you can't use bond funds to pay for a study or a plan. You can only use them for projects that lead to building something. So there's a little, going to punt it down the road a little bit. So we're asking that we move that project out to 2022, that 92nd Avenue recon study, as the municipality tries to figure out how to come up with that money for the match, if indeed they want to still continue with the project. And I think the most likely place, James and I talked about, it makes sense to move this $250,000 in 2021, just slide it down to the pavement replacement program. So that's kind of up to you folks over at DOT, knowing whether it's O'Malley that could use that 250 or some other project in there, pavement replacement or whatever. So I guess I'll leave that up to you to make that decision. But otherwise, this TIP amendment is ready to roll, and in order to get some of these funds obligated before the end of this federal fiscal year, which is the end of September, we need to get it done today.
So say that one more time about the bond monies can't be used for recon studies.
The bond monies can only be used for projects that are going to build something in the life of that project. So not for a plan, not for a study, recon study, etc.
So for example, the TDM study in the UMed area, how is that going to be paid for next year? Is that also going to be blocked?
So that one, the municipality was aware of that in time and figured out the different people around the municipality who could be working on that project and would be using non-federal funds to work on the project, and that captured their time and use it as in-kind match. So they were going to be working on that anyway, using non-federal funds, and it just gets captured and shown. They were planning on that one. It's possible that in-kind match could be used for the recon study as well, but there's not enough time in the rest of this federal fiscal year to identify it and lock it in and get it obligated. I mean, it had to be done in the next week or two.
TDM doesn't build anything.
Same thing. Yeah, exactly.
You're saying you're coming out with different.
Well, you can use in-kind match. We use in-kind match for the non-motorized plan and, other plans that we've done. They just weren't prepared. They didn't realize that they were coming up with a match for that. Since the project was originally nominated by the state of Alaska, I think they figured that's who was going to pay the match, so.
All right. Anything else, Craig?
No.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the committee?
I have a quick one. Looking at table 2, towards the bottom, there's a 0 in red under the 2022 column for the Seward Highway to Glen Highway connection. Was something removed from there?
I'll have to find that here. Oops, sorry. I don't have the original tip in front of me. Aaron, do you remember what that was there before? I don't remember now.
Yes, Aaron Young-Ganalen, AMATS Senior Planner. That was money for the Seward to Highway, Glen Highway PEL design funding. So to start a design project. And I think it was understood that there wasn't going to be enough time to finish the PEL study and start design in the time left for 2022. So that money was moved out for beyond 2022 to give time for the PEL to finish.
Or begin, really, but, okay.
Yeah, I think the original plan was, the idea was that PEL would be far enough along or would have been completed and they would have had some project in mind. There's the design hit for that first project. Obviously, as you know, that PEL is just getting started, so not ready for a design hit for a project because we don't have one yet.
Okay. My follow-on question would be down in just the updates to that.
We'll get an update for you. Thank you. Ms. Ellison?
So I have a question. If we have this $250,000, and hear the recommendation about the payment, can we talk about the timing on Academy Drive and Vanguard, and how we are currently aligning what we're putting in the tip here with the completion of the highway project? Because there's some concern that we're going to mismatch the completion of the highway project that's going to drive the traffic into that neighborhood. And I don't know if there's any way to leverage those funds to accelerate anything that would help better align those two projects.
Short of changing federal regulations on EPA and Uniform Relocation Act, all the timelines that
Sure.
drive the
Okay.
schedule. The city chose to not move forward with that project, and all that it had accomplished, it kind of hit the reset button. And now it's been handed to the state for development. And now there's very little chance that those two projects will align in terms of completion dates. So there will be a couple years where
Okay.
there will be traffic coming off of 92nd Scooter heading full speed ahead to a stop control intersection.
Okay, I just have to ask every time that there's that opportunity. My constituents are extremely worried about it, and you know,
Yeah,
it's a
and-
priority.
As they should be.
Yeah.
It is unfortunate that we are starting over as an MPO on this project. So, it is what it is.
I appreciate that. All right.
I would offer though that if there's federal funding for this project, that makes so much more sense than bonds to the taxpayer. It just makes so much more sense.
No argument either way. This is where it's going to go forward. Those are the timelines we're looking at.
Okay.
I'm grateful.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
we're going to tackle it, but it will not align for ribbon cutting purposes. So, Mr. Baker?
One question on the on table 3. I'm interested in maybe the downtown trail connection along with Fish Creek trail connection. Will that complete the connections, the Ship Creek connection, or is that just, where are we on that? I know that's been hanging around for a long time, and there's great interest.
Well, the project is designed to connect the coastal trail to the Ship Creek Trail in downtown Anchorage. It's obviously still early in the design phase.
It's just the design phase only.
This is the design,
And
yeah.
the FY '22, we're still in the design phase, is that correct? So there is no construction actually.
There's no construction in the life of this tip. It would hopefully be in the next tip.
Steps.
That's the theory.
How that impacts Constance district, I think that's been an issue that, so
The missing link,
Mhm.
Larry, is the connection up to Government Hill. And so that's kind of the last piece that isn't even really contemplated anywhere yet that I've seen. And so, but I don't know that that's regional. I think that might be a local issue. We'll figure that out soon.
look forward to working with you on that.
The good news is the chief of highway design lives at the top of Government Hill. So he's very
Thank you
interested.
for my representative representing me.
Yes. He's got skin in the game.
Okay, well, I just
So I would leverage that while you can.
Well, we both live on Government Hill.
There you go.
So,
Let's get it done.
yeah.
Thank
East-
you.
east
You know,
meets
2020
west.
2022, this tip here, it's not going to play out to work.
We're still in design, right?
Yeah.
Still have to take the next step before.
Environmental property.
Yeah.
Good question. Any other questions on?
You know, while we're talking about that link, there is a development project for a group that's down there at the railroad section. I don't know if it's been brought yet before this body. And that's the 49th state working with the railroad for a major kind of revisioning of that little section where their warehouse is down there. And so it would certainly intersect with this trail project. And so maybe at some point it would be wise to have them come and talk about what they're doing.
Request the railroad. Any other questions or comments? Okay, any questions or comments from the public? Yes? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, James Darzik, DOT Planning. We identified where the 250,000 was going in 21. I didn't identify where it would be taken out of 22. And I would suggest the CMAC number 7 project for capital vehicles.
Good point. We, for lack of a better term, we usually park extra funds that we're not quite sure of yet, either in the pavement replacement program, because we know they can always eat it, and also a lot of times in the capital vehicles for transit. We because they're always needing replacement buses. So we put a lot of money in there. That's $11,631,000. You know, as we get farther along, we'll know whether or not how much of that might stay there. So that's a good place for it to come out of. We'll move the project in 22. We can fund it out of that 11.6. We usually seem to spend around $3 million a year, or we try to allocate $3 million a year in that. So it's obviously more, but you'll see that there was a zero in 2020. So we shorted them that year.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Hearing none. What is the will of the committee regarding this tip?
Thank you, approve.
Second.
Then I think we can move to amend for staff's floor amendment. Right, did you have a floor amendment to move the 250?
Right, to move the 250 out of the
So out of
92nd and into, what did I say, payment replacement, and then in 22, add it and take it out of the capital vehicles.
Does everybody understand that? Choking.
That's one
I
term.
think that's number two.
We could use a different term. That'd be good.
All right. All right, so,
I moved that amendment, Craig just said.
okay. And
Second.
that amendment. Okay, any objections to that move? Okay, hearing none. And we have a motion to approve on the overall and second. Any objections to approving it as amended? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. Okay. All right. Great. Any other actions?
No, sir.
We're going to item 6A, MLK update. We have a presenter, Noah. Okay. Talk to us about the Martin Luther King project.
I don't for this one.
There we go.
You can either.
Okay.
I can give you this if you would like to try.
Yeah. That'll be all right.
Just scroll. Just-
Okay. Hello, my name is Noah King. I'm a project engineer with the Department of Transportation, and I'll be giving a quick update about the MLK Extension Project. We also are referring to it as the Tudor Elmore Neighborhood Connectivity Project. It's a little more descriptive title for public involvement. The project is being managed by the DOT, my boss, Alex Reed, myself, along with Melinda and Julie from PME. We have a design consultant for the environmental stage of the project currently, which are R&M consultants, and they're working on developing the environmental document, working with public involvement, preliminary design, and the CSS process. That process is expected to take about 2 years, and we're just at the beginning stages of that process right now. We started in January, I believe. This is from the project website, which is TudorElmoreNeighborhoodConnectivity.com, if anyone is interested in looking at it. It's sparse at the moment since we just started, but it'll be populated as we move on with the design. We've had 2 design charrettes to go over our preliminary design ideas at this point, and we're looking at having public involvement meetings this fall with community councils and open houses and planning and zoning. From the tip, looks like we have $16.5 million for the project right now. No money for right-of-way, which will definitely be necessary. And even though it's the beginning of the project, we anticipate the cost going up a little bit. The current purpose and need of the project is to accommodate increased traffic demand resulting from the development at Tudor and Elmore. As I understand it, there was a developer involved in this TED project before, but it is no longer the case. So we may have to revise that or determine the degree to which we improve access or accommodate future demand. This is cut off slightly, but it's not the project area where the future development is planned. And these are our main issues, but we considered when we developed our 6 or 5 alternatives. There's a bunch of wetlands at the south end of the project, the Campbell Creek Trail, there's a floodplain over here, assisted living facility, and 6F property. So our alternatives tried to avoid the southern route as much as possible to reduce the impacts. Based on our preliminary traffic study and research, we determined that a collector is the correct cross-section for the road, and then we also have some local road improvements adjacent to the collector road. Our initial alternative evaluation matrix has 5 alternatives where we ranked very subjectively and focused in on alternative 2 and 3. And since that time and in my previous presentation at the Technical Advisory Committee, we've weighted these alternatives and further zeroed in on alternative 3 being our least impactful alternative and most satisfactory for the purpose and need, the score of 55. Next was alternative 2, which is fairly far behind, so it looks like it'll be alternative 3 and the no build as our alternatives that we evaluate in the process. This is alternative 3. We, like I said, tried to avoid the southern area with the most impacts, wetlands and right-of-way. We also avoided the northern route that was previously considered because of some additional right-of-way, utility, and grade impacts. This, however, is still a fairly impactful route to the neighborhood. We expect, because of that collector width, about 72 feet, there's going to be some significant impacts within the neighborhood. We don't expect a ton of support from them. I believe that's about all I have. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So I do have a question on how the determination was made for the collector road. What data was used to drive that decision?
There's
Instead of the local road.
There's a traffic analysis from Dow that was developed with the developer, Irwin Developments, that was we pulled all that information from, and then along with the traffic counts from Tudor Road and Elmore Road.
Interesting, because the idea is that this extension is supposed to serve the development, so.
Dow projected the numbers that that development would, I guess, develop or increase the.
And then follow-up question is, has there been considerations of like how this might be accessed as a cut through of a Tudor avoidance?
We have considered that, and that it was the, not the main consideration, but one of the considerations for avoiding going along the south end of Piper with a large high-speed curve.
Okay.
So by going through the neighborhood and the roundabout, we tried to avoid as much as possible the potential of a cut-through situation.
Yeah, I'm actually meeting with the project manager next week on this.
Great.
Just on the surface, it appears trying to avoid forest and wetlands at the expense of an entire row of houses. I'm just not sure I'm comfortable with that balance. Just to be honest with you, I don't know if wiping out 2 rows of residential housing is,
The neighborhood's really nervous.
Well, and I think they should be. So I'm a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I'm meeting with Noah and the project manager and Jim to try and I want to dig into the details of how they came up with the scoring criteria and how they assigned those weights. Because for me to stand in front of a community council and say I'm wiping out 15 or 20 front lawns, just because I'm trying to avoid a little bit of impact on a wetland or a 6F, I'm not sure I can make it.
We are also.
I'm uncomfortable. I'll let you know.
And if I might, I would just add, somebody said the name Irwin, which is like a trigger for me. And Irwin, based on a development proposed by Irwin that has completely crumbled into dust.
Yeah.
And so what I think is also an important variable is to have an in-depth conversation with the 8th floor on their thinking about what the actual move forward might be for this land, because at this time, that project seems to have gone the way of, a number of projects, which means we'll never see it. And so are we gonna be transforming this section without an actual plan to move forward? And I see from Ms. Alva's response that the theory is still there, but from a practical perspective, everything that project touched turned into mud. And so I'm concerned that we're developing for a project that evaporated.
So more to follow.
I would ask you, Meg, what is your concern on that statement?
The concern is the neighborhood really wants the development, the TED development. They were looking forward to the grocery store, the additional housing in particular. Their desire is somewhat mitigated by the potential road, mainly the right-of-way impacts and the concerns about cut-through traffic, but they still are very much pushing to have that developed in the general concept as proposed. And the municipality has made a fairly decent investment in, rezones and other things to lay the groundwork for it. I think, the developer issue can be overcome, and it could dovetail nicely with the timing actually of the road project, just on how timelines work out.
I think that is the best use of that land to put in a commercial center with residential. But we have to really figure out what the new priorities are and it rises up and where it all fits. Because if we're going to do this and there's that major cost element, I don't mean the cash cost, I mean the cost of people's livelihoods and the peaceful enjoyment of their home that they've had, then it surely better be in service to a concept that's feasible, not to a concept that is just one more theory that's going by the ways.
Any other questions or comments from the committee on this project? Any questions or comments from the public on this project? Okay. No, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Item 16, Chugach Project Way Update Grant. Hello.
So my name is Laquita Chmielowski. I'm with Dowell, and along with CRW, we've been working on the Chugach Way Transportation Element Study, and we're just here to give you a little bit of update on where we're at with the project. Maybe. Thank you. So at the beginning of the project, we created a vision statement to help guide us as we go through this process. And so this was the statement that we came up with. It's to identify roadway improvements to support opportunities for redevelopment with the emphasis on safety, access, and multimodal facilities in the area. So it's kind of our guiding statement throughout. The study area, as you can see here, is bounded by Minnesota to the west, Bernard Road and 36 to the north, Arctic Boulevard to the east, and 40th Avenue to the south. So the existing conditions, the summary is just what we finished up. And so what we were looking at is all the studies and data that's been gathered for this area and kind of compiling it into a single document. And we did that with these kind of broad categories, looking at the built features, social and economic and community characteristics, traffic conditions, and then the natural environment and physical context. And so some of the observations that we saw with the built environment was that it has a very narrow right-of-way of 45 to 30 feet. This is a local road, which normally, as all of you probably know, has a 50 to 60 foot right-of-way. There's no formalized non-motorized facilities along Chugach Way or any of the intersecting streets other than Spenard Road and Arctic Boulevard. The water and sewer and storm drain in the area likely will need to be upgraded to support any future multifamily development with a higher density. And then it has a relatively low number of property owners. There's a few groups that own a large percentage of the property in the area. So for social, economic, and community observations, all of the Anchorage plans support this being a reinvestment focus area. The Spinard Road Rehabilitation Project is looking at improvements to walking and bicycling facilities, and hopefully we can provide recommendations that would carry that through this area. There's approximately 850 residents in the area. A lot of them are renters. They're low impact, and there's a high percentage of minority residents. So from a traffic perspective, there was we saw a significant amount of cut-through traffic along Chugach Way. 30% of that was local traffic. There was also a high percentage or an elevated crash rates at a couple of the intersections, mainly folks hitting objects often on the side of the street, hitting an object. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, there really are no non-motorized facilities within this area. So natural and physical environment, of course, there's the Fish Creek, historic Fish Creek channel, which actually goes underneath Chugach Way. And then there are 6 contaminated sites. 5 of those are brownfield sites. And then opportunities. So the area that's highlighted in blue is owned by a developer, JJ Brooks, and he just completed the rezone for this area to hopefully move forward with a multi-use development, which could potentially create 339 residential units. Cook Inlet Housing is the properties that are highlighted in yellow, and they've started their development there on the corner of 36th and Spinard. They will have a little over 100 units, and it'll also be a mixed-use development with senior housing and multifamily housing as well. So as we're looking forward, our next step is to start looking at alternatives, and the goal of this project is to be able to provide a recommended alternative that would move forward into an actual project. And so some of the things that we looked at was, can we widen the right-of-way? What do we do for sidewalk facilities? Improving lighting, snow storage, looking at all the different things that we could do with either along Chugach Way or making connections to other facilities within the area. And of course, we'd be happy to take your feedback and ideas because we're really early in this process. And then some of the criteria that we're looking at using as we evaluate alternatives is the ability to implement the plan. We want something that can move forward into a project that becomes a reality. Making sure we have pedestrian and bicycle facilities, traffic calming measures to deal with some of that cut-through traffic. Of course, right-of-way needs, that's a big concern here with the narrow right-of-way. Of course, the cost to build and implement, taking into consideration what these developers have planned for the future, making sure we don't negatively impact them, and then funding availability. And again, we're open to feedback and ideas on these criteria too. So over the course of the summer, we are we're going to have our first meeting with a smaller stakeholder group in August. And then we've given an update to the Spinard Community Council early on in the project. We'll go back to them in the fall when they start meeting. And then we'll continue working with those folks throughout the fall to go over alternatives and start whittling down to a preferred alternative. And then our goal is this winter to complete that study with that preferred alternative. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the public on the project? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Craig, are there any other planner updates?
No, sir.
Okay. Are there any general information items?
No.
I just was gonna ask for a brief update on LPL. I still haven't heard from the public that project to start.
Okay. Mr. Randall, can you give us just a real quick update on the PDL for sewer going?
Todd Van Howe, DOT Chief of Planning, through the chair. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to update this time. I can certainly take the question back and figure out, I know that the consultant and the group, or the project manager is working. I'm not prepared.
A more narrow
I'll be
question.
happy to figure out.
Was the final contract issued and signed and authorized? Is it done, or are they still negotiating, or where are we in that part of the process?
That's Kelly Summers, isn't it? Yeah, I'm just gonna.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's been executed. Sorry, Luke Boland, DOT Reconstruction Engineer. My understanding is that the contract has been executed and they're working on kicking off those efforts.
Okay, because last time it was, yeah, it's gonna happen any day, maybe on Tuesday, and
That was a month ago.
yeah, and so I haven't seen, so that's progress. I would love a report. I see a hand up. Mr. Chair.
Okay. James?
Yeah, James Stratton, DOT planning. I can confirm that the contract has been signed. The contractor and the project manager is working on it. And all the folks that are engaged with it right now are currently reviewing some of the foundational documents, some of the mailing lists that it's just kind of laying the groundwork for the project. So it is underway.
All I needed to know is they
They're
just
working
drive.
hard.
They haven't been dry for a
Yes, they
long
did.
time.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
we,
And I know this because I'm one of the people working on it.
and I believe we should have a website up on that pretty soon.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so,
Thank you. That's all I needed.
any other committee comments?
That's good.
Okay. Any public comments at all? Informational or otherwise? Okay. Other than that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. So moved. All right. Objections to approve motion? Hearing none, it's great to see you all back in person. And we'll see you again next month. Meeting adjourned. 23.
Chris Thompson moved.